And others will be reading their Black Girl Liberation pledges. I pledge allegiance to Black Girl Liberation, to the freedom of Black girls everywhere, not just the Angela Davises or the Ella Bakers, to those who aren't at the forefront of our fight, to those who can't fight, the Graces, the Black girls society doesn't tokenize, the Black girls that aren't in America, the Black girls that don't speak English, the Black girls that don't even know they're Black. I pledge to advocate for their happiness, for their laughter, for their joy, for their independence, for their ability to breathe, for their freedom. Chains constantly keeping us at the bottom, so that we all may rise up.
I will be leading the next pledge. I pledge to create. I pledge to paint myself Black, to sing with the choir of Black girls, and to dance holding my sister's hands. I pledge to create a home for Black girls. I pledge to make a home that is made of clay so that it can be molded for everyone's needs, so that we can define the terms, so that we can define the lines or blur them for ourselves. A home where Black girls are fed all the love and respect that they deserve, where we are nourished. I pledge to create a safe space for Black girls. Alternative, ratchet, academic, loud, soft spoken, strong, vulnerable Black girls. All Black girls. I pledge to create a safe space within myself that harbors the hearts and souls of all Black girls so that we can not just survive, but live and thrive. So that we can learn, so that we can heal, so that we can speak and be heard and be unapologetically ourselves. Black girl, no space. I pledge to create love for Black girls so that we love ourselves as much as we love each other.
Okay, so next we will be going over a key vocabulary. And these terms are important and relevant not only to the rest of our presentation, but to the movement. And not only understanding, social justice texts, but understanding what goes on on social media and what these terms mean as well is very important. So our first term is liberation, which is a high quality of freedom, freedom from limits on thought of behavior, freedom from social stereotyping. Our next vocab word is intersectionality, which is the way in which different parts of your identity experience different types of oppression. Our third vocab word is restoration, which is the renewal, revival, or reestablishment of something. The state or fact of being restored can be in the form of a return of something to a former, original, normal, or unimpaired condition, restitution of something that has been taken away or lost, and or something that is restored by renovation. And our final vocab word is autoethnography. Ethnography is the study of cultures and patterns of communities. Autoethnography is centering yourself in the process of this study, the study of self as a way to use yourself and identity and story as a tool to understand systems and structures. Please feel free to screenshot or take a picture of these words because, like I said, not only are they important to this presentation, but they are important to understanding the movement as well. I'll pass it on to Rissy.
Hi again. During our JDG course over the summer, we got to talk to so many phenomenal people and hear their take on black girlhood overall. One of those people was Tarana Burke. As many of you know, she is the founder of the Me Too movement. She's an activist for racial equity and for sexual assault awareness. I want to dive into some key takeaways from that discussion. But I also want to share real quick this quote from her. The most important person to tell your story to is yourself. So on the next slide, I'll talk a little more about some key takeaways from that discussion. The first one would be, I felt like it was my fault because I broke the rules. This is something that is so real for so many Black girls. Throughout our whole existence, we're told that we have this set of rules or these things that we have to live by, that we have to do this, that, and the third to get our life right, per se, when in reality, we should be able to live freely as who we are and as who we wish to be. So I want to challenge you to think, who made these rules and why do they even exist? Why are we putting this pressure onto Black girls all the time? The second one was your response to it in reference to assault in like any sort of setting, whether it be like a school setting, on like the street, anything like that. We tend as a society, we tend to see Black girls responding to assault, whether it be in like gym class and a guy hits you and you're like, don't hit me, or like push them away. We oftentimes get punished for our response to that. And a lot of the times the people who are assaulting us don't get that same punishment, if they get punishment at all. And then the third one would be, if you are using your trauma as a crutch, the reality is that you need a crutch. A lot of the times we like to tell Black girls that they're using a crutch, that they're using their trauma as a crutch, and that they shouldn't be relying on their trauma or anything along those lines, when, like in the quote says, we need a crutch. So rather than trying to tell them not to use that trauma, trying to support them through that and trying to aid them in whatever they need, whether it does look like using the trauma, and sometimes it won't, but remembering that the goal in the end is to support the Black girl who's going through whatever it is. And again, putting emphasis on not putting a blame on them for using that trauma or whatever crutch they decide to be using, but really making sure to support Black girls. I'm going to now pass it on to Hermela.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a modern day example of Black women not being allowed to heal. But first, I'm going to introduce the people involved in this incident. So, for those of you who don't know who Megan Thee Stallion is, she is a Black artist who's 25 years old. She's known for her uplifting and fierce anthems. She is also a part-time college student at Texas Southern University and is working to get her bachelor's in health and administration. She has 13.1 million followers on Instagram and 5 platinum songs. So if there is an example of Black girl excellence, I think Megan is an amazing example of this. So recently there was an incident between Megan and an African American male rapper named Tory Lanez, in which Megan ended up being shot in both of her feet. The attack was intended to hurt her, and she had to be taken to the hospital to have surgery and remove both bullets. Luckily, she made a full recovery, and the bullets didn't harm her in any lethal or non-fixable way. But many people took the situation and Megan's injury for a joke, especially on social media. And even people with large followings on social media or otherwise made insensitive and unnecessary comments, such as reality star Drea Mitchell. So up top, we have some quotes that were on social media about Megan being transgender and how she must have been shot because her feet were ugly. And also, the most alarming one is when she came out and described the experience as traumatic. People responded with, "I thought you were a savage. I thought you were strong." And while Megan is a well-known celebrity who has a fierce and admirable personality, it does not mean she's not human like the rest of us. And the fact that many people, it was like a phenomena of people who felt inclined to not only speak on the situation, but degrade and take the seriousness and severity out of the situation. This disrupts her healing process, and not only hers, but the healing process for all girls. Because when people like us look on social media and see how others react to someone who's famous and well known and well loves trauma, like that, we say, oh, well, if I come out with my trauma, then the reaction might be even worse. Her strong mentality shouldn't allow others to feel comfortable to blatantly discredit her emotions and pain and blatantly disrespect her. And I think that is something that many Black girls experience. Also, recently, Tory Lanez decided to come out with an album completely discrediting everything that Megan said. This album happened to be released the day after the Breonna Taylor verdict, in which we saw that the police were charged with endangering the lives of white neighbors instead of taking the life of Breonna Taylor, who was an EMT and a 26-year-old woman. So the fact that a Black man felt inclined to release an entire album, discrediting the trauma of a Black woman right after, something extremely disheartening happened in the Black community, and after, at a time where we're supposed to be grieving the death of Breonna Taylor and the lack of justice is really disgusting. So I think it's important to understand how not only the media and artists react to this kind of stuff, but how we react to Black women's trauma and how we expect them to be strong and inhumanely strong when they're people and they deserve to be treated as such. I will pass it on to Kyla.
During the summer, we had the opportunity to sit into a UC Berkeley class on Black feminist healing arts. And then the teacher for this class was Ree Botts. So if you don't know Ree Botts, she's a PhD student of African Diaspora Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. And she's also the founder of Black Women X Healing. So we learned a lot of important things during Ms. Ree's class, but one of the things that stood out to me was disrespectability. And then this is a new term to me, so I'm trying to explain it to you guys. So when we speak about disrespectability, we're speaking about the ways we disrespect systems of oppression. And it's a response to respectability politics, which work to police the Black community from within. So it's basically putting the blame onto Black people, saying how we should act better, we'll get treated better. And history has shown us that that's not true. And then these systems of oppression continue to attack Black girls' healing by minimizing and devaluing a Black girl's experience and feelings. And this also happened with Megan, as Hermela just described. So disrespectability is the way we as Black girls combat those harmful attacks and instead promote healing. So now I want to take you guys through some quotes from Ms. Ree Botts' talk with us. So the first one is, when we as Black women and Black girls talk about healing, we incorporate a lot of shame and blame. And then the question is really, where does all the shame and blame come from? Who's responsible for it? And really, how deeply does that run? And then I think it's a really important fact to consider that Black girls are raised to live a life of upholding the strong Black woman stereotype at the expense of their mental and emotional health. We don't get the liberty of being vulnerable and taking the time to heal. And being strong can be a good thing, but the way that it's interpreted within the Black community and pushed onto Black girls is that we have to hide our hurt and we have to ignore it at the same time. So as a result, when Black girls are vulnerable and try to open up, they're often not taken seriously. And when that happens, they're not going to want to do that again. So we also need to take into consideration the adultification of Black girls and how it removes healing as an option. Black girls aren't allowed to make mistakes. When a Black girl gets in trouble, either in a domestic setting or educational setting, oftentimes adults don't try to figure out what went wrong and how that Black girl may be hurting. Instead, the go-to response is, "You should have known better." And when you hear this response, inadvertently the statement, "you should have known better," places a lot of blame onto Black girls, oftentimes for situations that were out of their control. Over time, when she keeps hearing the statement, anytime a Black girl undergoes a traumatic event, she's going to make the connection that she's responsible for the event rather than her perpetrators. And this is especially prevalent with a lot of sexual assault cases. And then this makes it even harder for her to heal, because now she's thinking, I don't have the right to heal because she should have somehow known that this was going to happen and take the actions to prevent it. And then it even gets to the point where she's not going to address these events as traumatic anymore. She's going to normalize this. And then now also a second quote was, how do we intentionally disrespect the systems that disrespect us? And there's a way for Black girls to do it ourselves, but really the real important question is, how can you help Black girls disrespect those systems? And it's really about, how do we ensure that Black girls have the space and ability to heal undisturbed? So speaking specifically to Black girls, I think we can start practicing disrespectability by living our lives to our own standards rather than the ones assigned to us. And this doesn't have to be in major ways, as if like starting a whole protest or leading a riot. Rather, instead, just take the time for yourself, take the time to spend the day in bed, don't do your hair if you don't want to, just meditate, breathe, just know that you're here, you're present, and you're valid. And that's enough. You don't have to perform. And now, how can you, someone who isn't a Black girl or who hasn't experienced Black girlhood, support Black girls and their disrespectability? Well, there's 4 very achievable solutions. 1, allow Black girls to make mistakes and learn from them in an open and loving environment. Black girls are children too, and you should treat them as such. There's no different in treatment just because of gender or race, and that's something that really has to be remembered. To listen to a Black girl's experiences without contradicting how she feels. Her hurt shouldn't be discredited. Your first assumption should not be, oh, where's the proof? Rather, just listen to her and let her tell you her story. And if she gives you that trust in order to tell the story, please respect that. Because once that trust is betrayed, it's going to be extremely hard to put that trust in anyone else. 3, giving Black girls access to materials that can provide a safe space for them to grow. So JBG was that safe space for me. And if a Black girl, if you see her struggling and she can't come to you and she doesn't want to talk to you, that's okay. Please don't get offended. What you can do is try to find other resources for her and let her have that outlet. 4, stand up for a Black girl when her story is discredited and disrespected. And this is especially crucial for educators and caseworkers to do, because I don't know if you guys heard, but a few months ago, a 15-year-old Black girl in Michigan, she went under the name of Grace to protect her identity. It was during the time when we first made the transition to remote learning. She has a learning disability, and her school was not able to provide her the proper resources to ensure that she's working with that learning disability in order to complete her schoolwork. And because of this, she started falling behind. And then she already had a caseworker at this time, and the caseworker got called in to see what's happening. And basically, after a long session, what happened is that Grace, she got sent to a juvenile center because she wasn't doing her homework, even though the caseworker did not take the steps to realize that Grace has a learning disability and the fact that she was not providing the help that she was not getting the help that she needed. So Grace, she just recently got released, but she spent the majority of that time, the beginning part of quarantine, in a juvenile center when she should not have been there over something as doing homework. So we really need you to be there for Black girls when they're labeled as having an attitude or being a problem, because no one's taking into consideration her life outside of school. So now I want to pass it back to Hermela, who's going to take you through a poem about disrespectability.
Okay, so I'm going to read this poem. Time I read it, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and really visualize it. But the first time you can keep your eyes open. It's called Revolutionary Dreams by Nikki Giovanni. I used to dream militant dreams of taking over America to show these white folks how it should be done. I used to dream radical dreams of blowing everyone away with my perceptive powers of correct analysis. I even used to think I'd be the one to stop a riot and negotiate the peace. Then I awoke and dug that if I dreamed natural dreams of being a natural woman doing what a woman does when she's natural, I would have a revolution. Now I'm asking everyone to close their eyes for me to read the poem a second time. I used to dream militant dreams of taking over America to show these white folks how it should be done. I used to dream radical dreams of blowing everyone away with my perceptive powers of correct analysis. I even used to think I'd be the ones to stop the riot and negotiate the peace. Then I awoke and dug that if I dreamed a natural dream of being a natural woman doing what a natural woman does when she's natural, I would have a revolution. Everybody can open their eyes again. So this poem is so important to me, and I think to all of us at JBG, because it shows that Black womanhood is so heavily criminalized and disrespected that through being one's authentic self, Black girls are being a revolution. And I think this demonstrates disrespectability because people don't realize that the systems that are meant to oppress us want us to show up in the world in a very specific way. If you're not a certain type of Black girl, you will not be acknowledged, you will not be loved, you will not have opportunities. And if you are, not that certain type of Black girl, then you don't matter. And even that certain type of Black girl has to show up in a very, very, very specific way, because that respect that she has gained can be taken away at the blink of an eye. So this demonstrates disrespectability because by being our authentic selves, we are attacking and disrespecting the systems that are attacking and disrespecting us. And through being our most authentic selves and living our most authentic lives, we are telling those systems that Black girls don't have to show up in one very specific way to be respected and heard and loved. So this poem conveys a Black woman who radically dreams of a world where she feels empowered simply by being her natural self. And living out her truth brings forth a revolution. And I just think that is so powerful because it just shows how heavily Black girlhood and Black womanhood are criminalized and how hard it is to just be yourself and live your truth. And so the way that you, the listener, can help us as Black girls and us as Black women live our absolute truth and be our revolution in that way is, one, don't make us show up in specific ways for BLM. Don't criticize people for not showing up the way you think they should, because them being themselves is showing up. And two, I would just say listen and leave room and air for Black girls. I think so often we're suffocated by these societal norms of how we should be and what we should do and how we should talk and what we should say. And I think it's important for everyone who's listening to this to go into their daily lives and go into their worlds and realize that Black girls come up and can show up and should be allowed to show up in every way they want to and every way they can. So I'll pass it on to Joy.
Further speaking on criminalization, during the summer, we had the privilege to talk to Dr. Monique Morris, an author and creator of Push Out, a film about the criminalization of Black girls in schools. In her work, Exploring Restorative Solutions, she writes, restorative justice is an alternate paradigm designed to repair harm between and among people. Restorative justice also helps to seek and identify the harm, determine what needs to be done to repair it, and agree on who's obligated to do so. The problem with Black girls not receiving restorative justice is that they are 7 times more likely to be suspended than their white counterparts. They are 3 times more likely than their Latinx and white peers to be referred to juvenile court. And schools stop becoming a place of learning, but instead become a place of punishment and marginalization. By implementing restorative justice in schools, people will be able to resolve disagreements, take accountability for their actions, and embark on acts of forgiveness and togetherness. There would be mindfulness in schools. We'd be able to repair harm and restore relationships in our communities. And further, it would also have policies and procedures to provide an equal reaction to every action and justice on both sides. Now I'll pass it to Mariama.
Hi. Hi, I'm Mariama, and I will be speaking on Black Girl Autoethnography, made by Robin Boylorn. This autoethnography is called On Being at Home with Myself. From the vocabulary that was previously shown, we know that autoethnography is centering yourself in the process of study, the study of self, a way to use yourself, identity, and story as a tool to understand systems and structures. Robin Boylorn uses her writing in an academic setting to talk about embodied, critical, and culturally situated research that begins and/or ends at home, in the body we live with and the social circumstances we live through. From her work, I have learned to pay attention to what I am feeding my soul and even my mind. I have began to become more mindful of what I am hearing, saying, or doing because I may be disrupting my own home. I feel as though I'm being a little bit more greedy of my home and caring a lot more about who I'm letting into it. I'll pass the mic to Eden, who will be analyzing some quotes from the article.
Hi, I'll be going over some very important quotes that we've pulled from the autoethnography. But if you could, it would be really great if anyone could search it and read it for themselves. The first quote we'll be going over is, "Not the home where my mama lives, or the home I've made for myself. Home is a permanent place you can get used to." So here in this quote, Robin is defining home, and not as a physical stationary place that has like four walls and a roof, but as ourselves, and knowing that home cannot be someone else for you. It can't be just your mother, it can't be just your father, it has to be within you. In the second quote, Robin states, "When you are at home with yourself, you feel at home even at someone else's house. When I feel at home, I can make myself at home wherever I am, opening cabinets and drawers, making myself a cup of coffee, putting my feet up on the furniture, changing the channel without asking." I think that this quote is especially important when it comes to Black girls, because as Black girls, we are told and conditioned to shrink ourselves and to conform to the space that we are in. And so it's important for Black girls for us to fight this conditioning, and for Black girls to be allowed to be comfortable in their own skin and in their own bodies. And we need to allow them to be free in all spaces, especially spaces not created for them, and spaces where we condition to be uncomfortable. Quote 3, "We forget that home is supposed to be a place of vulnerability and surrender." And going off the previous one, we as Black women and Black girls are told to be strong and told to hold up the entire nation and to hold up homes. But for the sake of Black girl healing, we must find spaces to heal, and we must acknowledge that strength all the time is impossible. And Robin speaks this and understands that home in yourself is the place to heal. And our last quote, "Black girl autoethnography, a way of owning who I am, expressing, being at home in my skin, avoiding the pause, accepting the contradictions, and forgetting the grays." So incorporating Black girl autoethnography and the definition of home for Black girls, Robin uses autoethnography to connect the words of Black and girl, and to define a healing process that is about learning and defining yourself and understanding yourself as a Black girl, and accepting all your scars, physical, mental, and emotional, and ignoring the outside world that tells you that you are not worthy, but you are. And so that this healing process and this healing journey can begin. Now, Kalia, on other ways of finding home as a Black girl.
Continuing with the topic of home, we have 3 core ways on how you could also continue to do this. And then one is accepting yourself. As Black girls, we're often taught we have to conform to Eurocentric standards of beauty, causing us to dislike the parts of ourselves we should embrace the most. In order for us to find home within ourselves, we must first accept the parts of ourselves we have been told to dislike. And this really hits core with just accepting the way you look, accept your nose, your lips, your hair, your skin. All these are beautiful things. They're part of you. Of course, they're going to be naturally beautiful. And you shouldn't just discredit it just because you may not see yourself as much you do in the media. You are the only representation that you need. You're beautiful all on your own. And then 2 is validating yourself. A part of finding hope within yourself is recognizing that you are whole. Don't allow the world to make you feel any less whole than you are. Learn to speak to yourself. You are home. And this is especially true with, there's so many Black girls who are interested in so many things that's just different from the mainstream. There are Black girls who are poets, there are Black girls who are skaters, there's goth Black girls. There's all of these wonderful girls who have all these different interests, but they're so scared they're so scared to actually pursue them because they fear of being isolated. You have to please realize that yes, community is good, but with this community, we will support you in different interests, even though my interest may not be the same as yours. Really just take the risks and do what makes you happy. And then 3 is honoring your space. An element of finding home is honoring your space. This could mean setting aside a space for you to practice something you enjoy doing, such as drawing or dancing. Honoring your space also means decorating your space or sticking up some affirmations around. In addition to honoring your space physically, also honor your space as in like who you're letting into your life. A lot of the times the Black girls were scared to actually speak up because we don't want to seem, having an attitude or being rude or being angry. Like we don't want all those negative connotations put onto us, and they shouldn't be put onto us. But at the end of the day, we are valid in our feelings. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to say, hey, I just don't want to do this. This makes me uncomfortable, because it's your own feelings. make sure you voice that and make sure you create a space that really is meant for you. And now I'm going to pass this on to Hermela, who's going to be speaking about liberation for Black girls.
Okay, so I'm gonna recite another quote by the Combahee River Collective. If Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate on the destruction of all systems of oppression. I'm gonna read it one more time. If Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate on the destruction of all systems of oppression. And I just want to reiterate what our definition of liberation is. Liberation is freedom from limits of thoughts and behavior beyond physical barriers. So I think this quote is important because I think it speaks to the intersection at which we lay at as Black girls and Black women. You know, we're women, and so we face a lot of the oppression that women have to face, whether that be regarding sexual assault and just sexual oppression of any kind. But we're also Black, so we are affected by police brutality, and we are affected by unethical medical practices, and so on and so forth. So I think it's important for people to not only take, you know, Black women's issues into BLM and movements created for Black people, but I think movements like the LGBTQIA plus movement and the feminist movement also have to take Black issues and Black women's issues into their perspective movements as well. I believe that it's important for everyone to participate in the freedom of Black girls and Black women, because like the Combahee River Collective said, when Black women are free, that would mean everyone else is free. Because if we have Black women in the LGBTQIA plus movement, they're not free until LGBTQIA plus people are free, and Black women are free, and Black people are free. And I think it's difficult for people to understand the intersection at which we lay at and the amount and the weight of the intersections that we lay at. Because when you look at society, you can see the systems of oppression, all of them actively acting upon one group, and that group is us. It's Black girls and Black women. And I think it's hard for people to talk about Black women and their issues a lot of the time, and they want to change the subject because it's uncomfortable. And you see how actively and oppressively these systems are working when you look at communities of color, but Black women specifically. So I think that it's important for everybody to participate in liberation, because they need to participate in liberation for everyone to be free. And then on the next slide, we have ways that you can aid the liberation of Black girls and Black girlhood. So the first and most important way is calling out wrongdoing against Black girls and defending and protecting them. Black women are strong, Black women are amazing, Black women are great, but we're a lot more than that. And you cannot expect Black women to be strong and defend themselves all the time, because the truth is that we are so oppressed that if we're going to get anywhere in this world, we're going to need everyone else standing up for us as well. And it isn't just our responsibility to stand up for ourselves, because the truth is we did not create these systems, and we are affected by them to the point that it's hard for us to advocate for ourselves. So the brunt of that work should be on everyone else, not just Black girls. The second way you can aid Black girl liberation is by listening to Black girls. So often we discredit what Black girls have to say. We interrupt them. We snatch the mic from them. I've been to protests where I've had many people interrupt me while I'm talking, snatch the mic from me. And that's a literal example, but there are so many figurative examples as well. Black girls being cut off when they're talking in class, when they're trying to explain themselves. We don't give Black girls the room to share their experience, and therefore we don't understand. America does not understand the true oppression that they go through, that we go through. So I think it's important to listen to Black girls, because without listening, you can never truly understand or even begin to understand how strong and suffocating the systems of oppression we face are. The third way is understanding how race and class affect feminism. So like I said before, I think it is important for people to take Black women's issues into their prospective movements, but I think the feminist movement has failed at this greatly. And I think that they need to start incorporating Black women's issues and women's of color's issues in general into their movement. I think that, in some ways that it's a very racist and classist movement, because it caters to white, middle class women. And that's not fair, because like the Combahee River Collective said, our freedom and everyone's freedom is contingent on our freedom. So I think it's important they understand and preach our issues as well. And if it's not them doing it, they should at least give us the space to. So I think anyone who identifies themselves as a feminism should educate themselves on what Black women in America go through and have gone through. For example, I learned that Black women didn't get the right to vote until the 1960s. The feminism movement loves talking about how the 1920s where women got their right to vote. That is not true. And if you are not going to incorporate all women, then you can't say that's when women got the right to vote, because it's not. It's when white women got the right to vote, and that automatically makes it exclusive. And there have been many Black activists that said, like Sojourner Truth, who said, "Am I not a woman too?" So people need to understand, by excluding us from their movements, they're excluding real liberation. Another way to aid the liberation of Black girls is to seek to shift cultural narratives and our collective psyche towards Black girls. So what this means is, when you see Black girls in media showing up in one way, in one capacity, in one box, really, you need to understand that Black girls are people, and that they have the capacity to show up in whatever way they feel is correct for them and in whatever way is right for them. And when you start to think of, oh, this Black girl is weird because she's not showing up this way that I'm used to seeing, get that out of your head. Immediately remove that from your brain, because Black women and Black girls don't have to show up the way the media has taught you to expect them to. I think it's important to give Black girls room and air and space to figure out the way they want to be and the way they want to show up. So stop placing judgment on how Black girls are and how they should be, because there isn't a way they should be, and there isn't a way they are currently either. And then the final way is to understand the intersection at which Black girls exist at, and work to be accepting of all of the issues they are impacted by. So I think this is the most important, because if you don't understand that we are Black people, we are women, we are people of color in general, some of us are in the LGBTQIA plus community, some of us are the first generation, some of us are immigrants. If you don't understand how all those issues work to affect and oppress us, then you don't understand what Black girlhood is, and therefore you don't understand how to help liberate us. So I think educating yourself by listening to Black people and Black girls specifically is the most important and effective way to do this. And I think that it's important to understand what an intersection is, and understand not only what it is to be at that intersection in one way, but what it is to be at that intersection in many different ways, and what it is to be at many different intersections. Because people talk about immigrants, and they talk about, LGBTQIA plus people, but they don't understand how those can be combined into one person. So talk about those people that it's an intersection at, and not only the one narrative, the one intersection. And I'll pass it on to Joy for our discussion.
So these questions are points of discussion, whether it be with your peers or your colleagues, your friends, your family. You can even write them down in a journal. I'm going to read each question twice as slow as I can. So it'd be a great time for you to write it down in your notes app on your phone, or maybe try and find a notepad or a notebook that is close to you, and use them later as topics for self-reflection. So the first question is, how can healing help uplift and enrich Black girlhood? How can healing help uplift and enrich Black girlhood? Next question, how does vulnerability and truth-telling help us get free? How does vulnerability and truth-telling help us get free? Next question, how can you use your profession to promote Black girl safekeeping? How can you use your profession to promote Black girl safekeeping? Next question, how do you heal? How do you heal? And finally, what does home look like for you? What does home look like for you? So again, take all these questions that we've given you and genuinely use them for topics of discussion. Use it to reflect within yourself and wonder, what am I doing for Black girls? How am I showing up for Black girls? How am I helping to create a space for them to be comfortable with themselves? How am I showing them that I am here for them? I will pass it on to Kyla to share our interactive activity.
So we want to leave you guys off with a poem prompt that you could either do in a group or by yourself. So if you're going to do it in a group, I suggest everyone write one line and then really take the time to read it out loud if they are comfortable with this, and just really feel the weight of those words. And if you do it on your alone, either you can leave it at this one line or you could expand it more. But then after you do that, and after your pen is done writing, just really take the time to sit back, read these words out loud, read them once, read them twice, read them every day if you have to, and just really feel your words and what you're trying to say and how you're trying to express yourself. So the way this prompt works is that each line has to start with the word healing. And then for this one line, it either has to include a color, a shape, a sound, or a type of weather. And then the same line also has to include either a feeling, a place, or a thing. So this may sound kind of confusing, which is why we included an example. So my first line is, healing is sunshine rising over a hilltop. I started healing, my type of weather was sunshine, and my place was a hilltop. So that's basically how it works out. But to also provide you with more examples that we had from our previous class, I'm going to read a few, and I'll also read some of the one-liners and also one poem that someone took the liberty to expand it out to a more fleshed out poem. So the first one is, healing is singing the blues from my soul. Healing is golden love in the pouring rain. Healing is pineapple juice on a hot summer day, chilling down my throat, relief from the sun's strong push. Healing is a circle of sacred wombs wandering into widening waters. Healing is brown sand falling away between my toes. And now this last example is the more fleshed out poem. Ears soothed by Black Girl Curriculum. Hermela, the harmonica. Eden, the electric bass. Bree, the symphonic orchestrator. Chat room where the audience is placed. I've been doing this work in the cave just to take a peek out and hear a marching band doing the same. Healing is taking a leap and falling in a cradle of God's chosen. So that was some examples. I really hope you guys take the time to actually sit down and work and use this as a mode to heal. And now I want to pass this on to Hermela, who's going to just highlight some of the text we use in the presentation and that we use in our Black Girl curriculum.
Okay, so I'm going to be introducing some of the texts we use. And again, I think some of the best way, or the best way, the single best way to learn about the issues Black women face is to listen to Black women and read books and texts written by Black women. So first we have Exploring Restorative Solutions by Monique Morris, which is about how oppression works in schools and criminalizes Black girlhood there. Our second text is On Being at Home with Myself by Robin Boylorn, which we discussed. It's a Black woman autoethnography on how to be home with herself. The third is a poem that I read earlier, which is Revolutionary Dreams by Nikki Giovanni. Fourth is the Combahee River Collective statement by the Combahee River Collective. I read an excerpt from it, but it's a few page essay, and I really recommend people reading this as well. Fifth, we have Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde is one of our JBG favorite authors, and I really recommend you read this as well. And really anything by Audre Lorde is a good read and a good idea if you're trying to understand Black womanhood and girlhood. Dance is My Spirit Language by Tanisha Douglas is an essay about how one woman uses dance to heal. And finally, we have a pretty popular poem by Lucille Clifton called Won't You Celebrate With Me, which is also just a great read to understand kind of Black girlhood and everything we discussed today. Please take the time to read these texts and feel free to, write these down or take a screenshot, a picture of them, whatever you need to do. For our closing remarks, I will pass it on to Rissy.
Hello again. I just first want to say thank you all for allowing us to share our time with your time. Thank you for listening in. I hope everyone was able to have at least one takeaway from all of the great things that we've shared today. On the screen, you can see all of the places that you can support us as Justice for Black Girls. You can check out our Instagram, which is at Justice for Black Girls. Our website, www.justiceforblackgirls.com, and of course our email address, which is justiceforblackgirls@gmail.com. I want to give a shout out to all of the Black girls out there, all of the JBG ambassadors who may have tuned in. Also, shout out to Miss Brianna. Shout out to Girls for Gender Equity. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in, to allowing us to share our time with you, and for really listening to what we have to say.